Hi guys, it's Beth. Welcome and welcome to a new year of Smash Our Stash. This is a collaboration that I host that encourages you to focus on items in your stash that you may have hoarded and really need to use up some of it. This is a collaboration to encourage you to pull those items out, have some fun with them, and there's like a different item or theme each month that we focus on. And it's just helping us work through some of our stash. So the prompt for this month was scraps, paper scraps. Could be cardstock, pattern paper, doesn't matter, just any kind of paper scraps. We all have that box, bag, or drawer full of paper scraps that after we make a project, we toss the scraps in there and kind of forget about them. There was a box that there's a box that I keep next to my silhouette, and after I cut my letter blocks or after I use paper on a project for craft shows, I tend to throw the scraps in that box, and I will post a picture of what that box looked like before I started working on smashing that stash. And so what I did is I sorted through all of the papers. I sorted the pattern paper by theme or holiday if I could. If not, then it just kind of went into a general pattern paper bag. And then again, I pulled out all the cardstock pieces, and I first cut down any that would work as a card mat. So these are A2 size card mats, and this is just my go-to size for most of my card making. And so I cut a bunch of the cardstock down to mats, and I used a bunch of them in the cards that I'm going to share today. And then anything that was smaller went into the cardstock bag that I keep by my scrap desk. And I do go there first. If I'm looking for a piece of cardstock, I do go there first. So it's still pretty full because I do still tuck a lot of scraps in there as I go, but I at least now think about using it. So I ended up, after I sorted, I had a bag full of Valentine's scraps, and I decided to start there since that is the next holiday, card making holiday that is coming up. And so I have 40 Valentine's cards. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on them because there are a lot, but I will say that in that box of scraps, there were some, not just scraps from things I had cut with my silhouette, but there were some other things I had cut with my silhouette that I didn't use for whatever reason I cut them for. And so you'll see some of those things come through these cards as well. For example, this heart background, and the size was just a little bit off. It was wide enough to be an A2 size, but too short. I don't know if I had resized it, and I don't know, so it didn't work. So I had just chucked them into my scrap box. So I just decided to trim down a card base. So it's like just shy of 5.5. It's 5.25 inches tall by 4.25 inches wide to make that little heart background fit. And then just layered some of the scraps that I had, die cut 2 hearts, layered them on, used another scrap behind it, and then most of my sentiments were pre-printed and already in my stash. And I did end up printing some more just to make it quicker since I had so many cards. And so that is what I used there. And then here is the other one, same thing, just die cut some hearts to go on it. And then I had a bunch of strips once I cleaned all of my scrap cuts, scraps up. I had a bunch of strips, so you're going to see a lot of these where I have 2 pieces together in some form, and then I've used this is a scrap of vinyl actually that I had made into my own like little Love for Lizzie strips, just like a vinyl strip. And so I covered the seam there, layered up some of the other scraps that I had onto the circle, and there's my sentiment. And this heart was actually in my scrap box already. So this is another common design you're going to see. I have found that when I'm making a whole bunch of cards like this, if I have a whole bunch of pieces that are the same size, I find a couple of designs that I can use for all of them, and just crank them out rather than looking for a new design, you know, for every single card. So like the two strips here that are different sizes, just kind of overlapping them and putting a strip across the middle. And then that's another one of those hearts that was in my stash. These were 2 hearts already cut in my scrap box, and so I just made them the focal point of the card. And there are several of these. Quick and easy. This was an embossed piece that I think I had gotten off on the embossing folder, and so it was a little bit uneven. And so I didn't use it for whatever I had needed it for originally, and ended up just trimming it down and putting it on this card as just a card mat instead. Here's those overlapping scraps again, and just pulled in bunch of scraps. This was an embellishment that I had made with some pieces left over from a pad either that I had used last year or the year before. Don't remember. So I just pulled it in. Vinyl circles, or not circles, hearts. Hearts that I had cut from scrap vinyl. So again, there's lots of these where these 2 different sized strips are together. This was a piece of, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like handmade paper, but it's, you know, textured. And so I had a piece big enough. I used that as a card mat. And then I also used the scraps for my circle here, and then die cut 2 different hearts. So there are all kinds of things in my scrap box. Some pink shimmer cardstock. I like the black, the pop of the black on the pink here. And then I had a ton of little strips. And so I made a whole bunch of strip cards. This one I just layered up some circles, added some little puffy hearts. But most of them have like the circles and then a strip where I did stamp my sentiment off to the side. So just using up all the scraps in different ways. So I did use one card sketch. This is card sketch number 22 from, does it say Devon Griffith? She's a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and it's just kind of a variation on my Operation Right Home sketch number 154. And it still uses the squares, but there's no like solid background behind the squares. I just backed them all individually with cardstock, and I actually made mine a little bit bigger than what she had on there, because again, trying to use up the scraps. And then just took whatever strip I found that worked with the patterns of my squares and put it down the right hand side. And then this was a scrap piece of vinyl that I had already had cut. Here just made some rectangles to fill like a card mat. I have several of those. And then these are just pieced together to kind of make a card front. This one was just using some last little bits of strips that I had, grouped them together, and added a sentiment. Didn't have any off-white, so I made that work. This was just some bigger scraps that layered up. So there's lots of color, lots of pattern going on in these cards. This was an oval. The red cardstock oval was already cut and in my scrap box, so wanted to make use of that. So those are the Valentine's cards I made, and I had intended to get through my St. Patrick's Day scraps as well, but I didn't quite get there. So I have a few like cards on card bases that are works in progress, and then some of them are just like card fronts, but they haven't been embellished yet. This was some letters that were in my scrap box, and I just put them on some cardstock to make a card, like a focal point for a card. Just layering up the different scraps. My mother-in-law gave me some card bases that were like that neon, or like kind of a neonish green. Happened to work with these, so wanted to use those up. Here I went ahead and glued the two pieces together so they're ready to go on a card front. This one just needs the sentiment glued on and some kind of focal point there, and then I had two yellow card bases already in my stash, so used those with that. And I do have just a few more scraps left to play with of the St. Patrick's Day or the greens, and then I'll be done with those, but I still need to finish all these cards. So, but I did get 40 Valentine's Day cards made just from scraps and cardstock from my card bases, but I did not cut any card mats. I did not cut any full-size cardstock pieces down for a card mat. It was all from scraps that I had. And then these, and I could probably go back through my cardstock scraps and maybe cut down a mini slimline card mat out of those. I didn't think about that when I went through the first time, so I can go back and do that and have some of those ready to go. It just makes it easier when you're making a bunch of cards. So that is what I have for you using scraps this month. Please check out the collaboration list in the description box below to see what everyone else has made. And you can also play along with us if you'd like on YouTube or social media, and just use the hashtag #SmashOurStash2022. And I thank you guys so much for your time today and hope you all have a very crafty day.